because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a podcast where we explore philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today our film is National Treasure. And the special occasion for the film is our guest, whose new book, Age of Cage, 4 Decades of Hollywood Through One Singular Career, charts the highs and lows of Nicolas Cage's unpredictable and fascinating career. It's a wonderful and scholarly look at one of our finest living actors, and we're delighted to be joined today by its author, Keith Phipps. Keith is a writer and an editor whose writing on film and pop culture has appeared in too many outlets to list right at this moment. You can subscribe to his newsletter, The Reveal, which he writes with Scott Tobias, and you can listen to him on the podcast The Next Picture Show, which he hosts with Genevieve Koski, Tasha Robertson, and Scott Tobias. Welcome back, I should say.
Okay, now I'm ready to talk. Yes, hello. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
We're really excited to have you back, and to have you back for this, for the publication of the book, which I just picked up and is out now in stores, so people should check it out. And really, I think I want to start with scene setting a little bit. So we chose National Treasure because I suspect it's one of, in terms of box office, one of the more popular Nick Cage films out there. You can tell us, Keith, if that's right. But I was wondering if you could set the stage for us. So what's going on in 2004 when this film gets released? Like, what's happening in Cage's filmography, in his, in the arc of his career?
It's a lot going on because, he's become a big star in the 90s thanks to the action films, and it was turned into a box office draw, which wasn't really necessarily before. He was an acclaimed actor and a recognizable name, but he wasn't necessarily. There's in the book, I have a quote from Michael Bay talking about how there's a difference between actors and movie stars, and this is, at this point, he'd become a movie star. He put his name and his face on a poster, and you're off to the races. You're partial way to having a successful film already. So, but it's become a little more difficult for him in the 21st century. There's some movies that just don't quite work. Captain Corelli's Mandolin seemed like it could be another Best Actor nomination, but nobody likes the film. It's not that great.
Yeah. Who saw that film though? Too. I was reading about that, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that movie.
Yeah.
But vaguely. But I never saw it. So I remember when it came out.
Vaguely is the way to do it. The only way to remember it, I think. So it is not a particularly memorable film. He does an Italian accent in it, which is a choice, but that doesn't quite work out. Wind Talkers is the second John Woo film that's not a hit. I like that film. I think it's quite good. At the same time, he started Saturn Films, which is his production company. So he's not just making movies for other people. He's making movies for his production company, shepherding other films as well. He makes his directorial debut with a movie called Sunny, which nobody saw. And he has a small role in that, where he wears an outfit he purchased at Liberace's estate sale. Sunny is kind of like a really earnest attempt he put some Cassavetes people in it. It's an attempt to do a fairly serious drama about a man who comes from the army and kind of falls into sex work. He's played by James Franco. There's a lot of admirable things, and it just doesn't quite work. And it comes out at the same time as adaptation, which of course is a big deal. He gets an Oscar nomination. After that, it's Matchstick Men, which you said brings some underrated Cage performances. We'll talk about that one more later. I think that's a really good movie that doesn't quite get it doesn't quite spark at the box office. Then there's National Treasure, which is an unexpectedly big hit. It exceeded expectations. I think both for a Nicolas Cage movie in 2004, although he was still a very big star, but also for a Disney action film. And you're right, it was quite successful, and I think it's also had a longer shelf life. I was just I visited my daughter's 5th grade class to talk about how a book gets made, which was really fun. Aww. And I asked them if they knew who he was, and I thought National Treasure would be the ones that everyone knew because they're on Disney Plus, and they weirdly Ghost Rider because it's just such a superhero moment for kids.
Huh.
And like
Wow, I wouldn't have guessed
more had
that.
seen Ghost Rider, but still,
Wow.
it's stuck around. I think it's a film that people have remember and revisit, and it works. I think it's a good movie.
I
so.
do. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I later I may talk a little bit about my journey with this movie because I think when I've seen it a few times now, but we rewatched it when we did our Summer of Cage a few years ago. I was actually a little bit down on it, but actually rewatching it in this context, I think I've changed my tune on it. But yeah, that's really helpful. So one of the things you cover in the book is you sort of break up, so it's 4 decades, right, of Cage's career, and we're going through the 4 decades of Hollywood simultaneously. So you're charting the change in what's going on in Hollywood and how movies are made, how they're marketed, who they're marketed to, what they care about, what types of movies seem to matter for box office success, and so on. And then seeing what's going on with Cage's career at that time and how they're in parallel, but also in conversation in a way. And one of the really interesting things that I took away from your book is, you sort of divide it up. Like we have this sort of early Cage. He's experimenting. He's trying new things. And, famously, this is like, Vampire's Kiss, the most extreme version of that, but also Raising Arizona. And then there's this kind of interesting 90s period. And there were actually a bunch of films you talked about that we didn't rewatch when we did the Raging with Cage, but you called it, I think, the softer side of Cage. So this was like Guarding Tess and It Could Happen to You and so on. And, I hadn't, those movies like weren't on my radar for the rewatch because I was like, these are like the boring ones. I just, that's what I thought of. I was
So
like,
instead we watched Next.
Well, look, I wanted to see the later Cage, so we did watch Next. But,
Sure.
But I skipped those, but what's interesting is then if you put those next to which they come out right around the same time, just before the Action Cage, which you talk about like in the mid 90s, and in a way, I feel like this movie, National Treasure, is kind of like a combination of those two sides of what he was doing in the 90s. I mean, also City of Angels, right there, the softer kind of Cage where he's played, maybe a little bit more romantic. He's sanding down those edges. And then the more actiony Cage, he's moving and he's got a bit of a wild side. He's a little bit unhinged in this movie. There are moments which kind of where it shines through, but it's all much more softened down. It's for the Disney audience. But I think when I watched it the first time, I thought, this is just Cage phoning it in. But when I watched it the second time, in light of, or I guess this would be the third or maybe even fourth time, but when I watched it most recently, in light of reading your book, I was like, actually, what he's doing here is actually really cool because I think he's combining different things that he had been doing throughout his career. And so I was curious if, how you see this film as a Cage film. Like, do you actually see it as a Cage film or do you see it as a Disney film that happens to have Cage in it?
I think it's a Cage film, and I think you're right. I think you're onto something there. Where the thing those early '90s films, like It Could Happen to You and Guarding Tess and not Leaving Las Vegas, Honeymoon in Vegas, is he's really good at just playing just earnestness, just really sincere people who are trying to do the right thing. I read about in the book too, but he did this noir called Red Rock West around the same time, where obviously it's a much darker material than It Could Happen to You or those comedies, but he's just playing someone who just wants to stay on the side of the angels. Like he's a really desperate character. There's a scene early on where he's next to a open cash register, and you can just see in his eyes how much he needs this money and he's tempted to take it, but he just doesn't because he's a good person. And I feel like he's bringing that into National Treasure in a really fun way. I keep thinking about, someone described Jonathan Demme once as someone who believed everything they learned in civics class. And I feel like that kind of describes Benjamin Franklin Gates too, where he's
1,000%.
Yeah, he's patriotic in the sense that he believes in this idea of what America ought to be and the founding principles in this really sincere, schoolboyish way, but he'll fight for it too. It's I think it's a fun character, and I don't think this movie could get, other people could have been in this movie, but I don't think that sort of like investment and sincerity, at least as he plays it, could come from another actor.
It is interesting to think a little bit about whether this is a role that is somehow uniquely Cage's, or if what would change in this movie if it was a different actor in a way. And the only person I had on my mind initially was Tom Hanks, and part of the reason Tom Hanks was on my mind was because we just did the Da Vinci Code 2 weeks ago on the pod, and so it's this Da Vinci Code comes out a little after, but it's very much in the same spirit as this movie. Of course, the tones of the movies are very different. Very different. But the thing I took away from Da Vinci Code with Tom Hanks is Tom Hanks had at that point in his career firmly been in the mode of America's dad, right? He's the kind of guy who makes you feel like everything's going to be okay because he's in control and he's calm and collected. And he gives this speech at the end of the Da Vinci Code, which is just like a dad telling his daughter, not really, but Audrey Tautou, basically telling her like, it's okay, you can live your life and do what you need to do. And he's just reassuring her. And, Cage has played that fatherly role at times, but that's not the role he occupied in the American psyche throughout his career. And I don't feel like that's the role he has here. Instead, the role is more, Benjamin Franklin Gates, that is, his role here is like, he's a bit of a wild man, right? He's got this wild streak, but he also has this earnest sentimentality about the fabric, the founding fabric of the American, experiment, so to speak, and American history in particular. And the thing you said about Demi, about that seems exactly right for this character, that this is a guy who lives, completely by a certain picture of the U.S., which is the one that we all learned in 8th grade,
yes.
Which is untainted by the actual moral complexity of what happened in American history. And so there's a certain, and Cage plays that totally, but he also plays a kind of slightly unhinged conspiracy theorist, right? And that's the thing that I find so intriguing about this role, is that he has both. And this movie plays, I think, very differently today. Like we when we rewatched it, that was 2019. So, or 2018, actually. I can't remember, but it was a little bit before it was right maybe around QAnon time, but we weren't thinking in terms of conspiracies. We weren't thinking that kind of thing. And so this movie plays where like Nick Cage is right on that boundary of being like too crazy, but not really, because he somehow is able to pull it back because he's this like Boy Scout as well. And I think that walking that line is something that an actor like Nick Cage, he basically was like, incubated in his career for trying out all these things, swinging both to the completely insane side and to the more maybe, softer sentimental side. And so he's able to do this because he's done both extremes. And so he's in this position to be able to like chart that path that I find just completely fascinating. But it is really subtle, and so subtle, I think, that I didn't really pick up on that when we rewatched it for the first time years ago.
A sophisticated blend of Cage's Cage vintages, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, conspiracy theories aren't quite as fun as they used to be, are they?
I know, right?
Now that we've seen their actual effects. I was rewatching, not to get too much of a tangent, but I was rewatching some stuff from the 1992 lead up to the 1992 Oscars for another piece I was writing, and JFK was a big part of that Oscars race. And I watched the Siskel and Ebert special, and it was they were very, Ebert in particular was just very sincere in his praise of the film for getting at the truth, and how they're going to unlock and like, and it was. How can I know? I don't know. It's a film that'd be an interesting film to revisit one of these days.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to get into this again because I think we've mentioned this before, but I'm a borderline conspiracy theorist when it comes to jail.
Can we tell the story one more time? We've told this, I think, on mic, but it's worth telling
I'm
again.
from Dallas, and I don't know. I'm open to possibilities. Is all I'm saying.
So we went to Laura took me to visit her parents years ago, and we went. She's like, you got to go to the sixth floor museum.
It's called the sixth floor museum.
Okay, so we sixth floor museum, and then where the book depository where Oswald was and all that. Okay, so then,
but was he though?
Okay,
Sorry.
well, whatever. But then we go to the grassy knoll, and there's of course a guy who's got his DVDs and a little DVD player, and he's showing things. And I was sitting there watching this, thinking, this is completely nuts. I mean, he's got like laminated charts, right? Anytime somebody's got laminated charts and they've got a pointer, you should not be taking this person very seriously. I turned to Laura after we leave, and Laura was like, should we get that guy's book? I
think whatever you think of the events, the legitimacy of the theories themselves, it's inspired so much compelling art. I mean, I'm a big fan of American Tabloid. Libra is a great book, and I think 1960, the November 11th, 1963, the Stephen King book is really good. Is it November 11th? Right? Did I get that right? No.
I don't know.
I don't.
Do you know? You think I should know that.
Anyway, we should be able to nail down the date. Anyway, I think that's a really interesting book as well. So I don't know. It is such a fun, a moment when the American psyche cracked. It has to, it's no wonder it inspires interest in stuff. Maybe National Treasure 3 could have been about the Kennedy assassination.
I mean,
that'd be a darker turn for the series.
I mean, I was thinking, like we should speculate a little bit about what they could do. I mean, not that they're going to do anything, but feels like Nick Cage right now is doing these movies which are a little bit more contemplative. He's looking back on his career. He's looking back with regrets. He's older now, so he can do this kind of thing with gravitas. How about National Treasure? He's older. Him and Dan Kruger now have a kid, and they got to pass on the secrets, right? But the kid maybe isn't that into it, and so or whatever. He's got to get him.
Johnson Barth is there. It's just like the weird uncle.
Yeah, Johnson Barth is the weird uncle, and he's wondering like. Or maybe he's grappling with QAnon, right? So he's like, Nick Cage. How about this? Nick Cage is a QAnon supporter, and his son has got to pull him back from the brink.
Oh my gosh.
I like it. No, actually, I don't know. I think he's too analytical to fall into the QAnon hole. But who knows? But I do think you're on something though. In terms of the series, it's about how this is passed down from one generation to the next. So a children of a child of those characters would make a lot of sense as a subject for a sequel. It is weird that they didn't do a third one because the first two were so successful, and I think it was Turtletop years later. I believe it was Turtletop who said that the problem was Disney didn't know how to do other things with it. Like the movies were successful, but how do you turn that into a ride? How do you turn this into a whole thing? And I find that a fairly depressing thought, but also it is the way things have been going, and it's only gotten more that way since then.
I know, but I feel like we can revisit this because we're a little bit past this moment now, but like escape rooms, this would be perfect for escape rooms. I guess we watched National Treasure too, and I was thinking about that a lot with the desk that they have to get the right numbers in there for it to unlock, and I was like, this is so escape room.
Totally.
I feel like they could absolutely make a curated special experience at Disneyland. National Treasure escape room.
I was really surprised to read that in your book that they were like, the reason we couldn't do it was that we didn't know how to basically make a ride out of it. But because I was thinking, one, escape room, but two, I was also thinking of, that show on Nickelodeon, Legends of the Hidden Temple, where they would where they would have part of it was like a quiz, and then part of it was
Carmen Sandiego,
or like this other. And then the one part at the end was like they had to do, it was some physical thing where they had there were puzzles and they had to run around. I was thinking there's got to be a way to do something like that where you have, groups of people and they can go in and compete against each other, right? And there's the quiz is like American history, and then I don't know. I just feel like it's.
We have a lot of ideas.
I mean. Turtletop, who's the president of Disney right now?
Not Turtletop.
Not Turtletop.
Casey, yeah. Who knows? I mean, it is. The other factor though is they did another movie together called The Sorcerer's Apprentice,
right?
Which was an attempt to do a live action version, a la Pirates of the Caribbean, of that character, and it was not successful, and I don't think it's successful as a film, and it just was a box office bomb. So that might have marked it would have been a black mark on their ledger in terms of more Disney big budget Disney projects.
Yeah, that seems exactly right. So one thing I thought was kind of cool about this movie in particular, well, we watched it and then I was like, what was the reason they were searching for why was the treasure hidden? We were trying to figure this out. This was what we were trying to do 5 minutes before the podcast. So I was like queuing up Disney Plus, like rewatch. Okay, what happens? Then when we got the answer, because it's explained to us at the beginning very clearly, I just maybe wasn't paying attention. It's actually kind of a cool idea. So it was worth just kind of spelling out the basic gist of the plot of National Treasure here briefly. So there's this massive treasure that has been accumulated over, thousands of years of human history, and various conquerors have fought wars, and it's changed hands various times. And this treasure has, for various reasons, made its way to America. And because it's, there's been this group, the Knights Templar, who've decided to hide it and basically keep it because they don't want any one person to have control of it. They think it's too powerful. So they've decided to keep it secret and pass down that secret. And ultimately, what Benjamin Franklin Gates, Nick Cage's character, is trying to do is find the treasure so that it doesn't fall into the hands of bad people who are just going to, I don't know. I don't actually know what you do with a bunch of treasure except sell it, but I guess live in a treasure palace. but anyway,
jump into it like Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah, Scrooge McDuck. So anyway, but he has he wants to carry on the noble idea of divide it up, right? Divide up the treasure amongst all the world so everyone can experience it. It's for the world, it's for the people. And they even explicitly note that that's exactly what the founding fathers thought. They thought too much power leads to corruption, so we need to divide the power, have divided governance. And I like that they connected those two ideas. Mm-hmm. It just went too quickly for me. Even the third time I saw it, I wasn't paying attention. But when I rewatched it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I kind of wish they would hammer home that idea a little bit more, because I think it's a really good, noble idea to have. It's a nice message to have in a kid's movie.
Mm-hmm.
They knew they had to make sure the treasure would never fall into the hands of the British. So they devised a series of clues and maps to its location. Over time, the clues were lost or forgotten until only one remained, and that was the secret that Charles Carroll entrusted to young Thomas Gates.
And so, anyway, this kicks off a series of events. Gates is on the trail, and for various inexplicable reasons, he goes very quickly from my arch nemesis, played by Sean Bean, is going to steal the Declaration of Independence to I have to steal the Declaration of Independence
to protect it. It's so
to
clear.
prevent this other guy from stealing the Declaration of Independence.
It makes perfect sense.
It does.
Right.
It does. Sometimes you just have to steal as in the sequel, in the sequel, you have to kidnap the president every once in a while. Sometimes you have to steal the Declaration.
I know. By the time we get to the sequel, he's not even, concerned about it at all. He's just here's the plan.
Yeah. In this one, he seems a little concerned at first.
Yeah, there's a little bit of, waffling. Can I do this? Is this right? Yeah, not in the second one.
It means if there's something wrong, those who have the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action. I'm gonna steal it.
What?
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Ben?
I would watch this. I watched this then and kind of see it now as this is a kind of, it may not actually exist, but it's the kind of America I can really get patriotic and believe in, you know, and it is beyond, it's kind of beyond the, it's nonpartisan in a way, but if you see one side as taking this language and corrupting it, you can kind of see this as more of a purer version of that language that you can actually get behind, and that's how I see it. That's how it affects me when I watch it. Yes, okay, I will pledge allegiance to this flag.
Totally, yeah,
yes.
Totally, and I mean, watching it today, it feels even more like that, because in today we have this on both sides. I mean, I don't cast aspersions only against the side that is opposite of me. I recognize that on both sides of the political divide, there is this tendency to desire quick solutions, right? To overturn this kind of divided governance, which leads to things like stalemate and quagmire and, things not getting done. But that's actually supposed to be
by design.
By design, not a bug in the system. There's a reason why the system moves slowly and that things, take forever to get done. It's so that we don't have one person, whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's Nancy Pelosi or whoever, just taking power and saying, okay, now here's the rules for everyone. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you, Keith. I think actually, in a way, this could, I make a prediction right now that this, I think once we're seeing this kind of, a lot of the art we're seeing today is dealing with Trump and Trumpism, often in very sort of diffuse ways where it's not obviously Trump, but in the background it's Trump. So I'm thinking of like a bunch of movies that came out last year that seemed like this: Red Rocket, Nightmare Alley, Don't Look Up, but that's pretty obvious. No, I'm thinking of the more sort of more interesting takes on it, even Licorice Pizza to a certain extent. But I suspect that once we move past this, there may be a certain nostalgia for movies like National Treasure, which really articulated this more, this older, more venerable tradition in U.S. politics. And it could mean that this movie could continue to have legs. And I think maybe what happened in the last 10 years, but maybe, Keith, you can give us more perspective on this, is that this movie, I feel like, kind of stuck around partly because people said, not because they were taking very seriously the message, but rather that they were kind of jokingly, engaging with it as a kind of a goofball, like, oh, I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence. It's so goofy. And because the movie has that, it recognizes that it is goofy and somewhat slapstick. But I also think a lot of the sort of engagement with the movie seems to have, and I count myself among these people, was not engaging with the actual earnest message of the film. And that's the thing that could play better, as we move on. I don't know. It's
a great hook though, right? I mean, you don't really, can you think of the Declaration of Independence without thinking of this film anymore? As silly as that is, I imagine that joke is made however many times a day at the National Archives.
Yeah.
Is there a map on the back of this? I think it does help make it memorable. But I think there's, if it were just that, I don't think it would have the staying power that it has. And I think for some of the reasons that you're articulating too, that and it's fun and the puzzles are fun, and it's kind of, I think the one other element of his performance is a little bit of Adam West Batman too, just the puzzling things out loud and making connections that maybe aren't logical in many ways, but are fun to make. So I think it's a fun movie that way.
On the Declaration of Independence stealing thing, can I ask you, so I remember that I think I saw this movie in theaters, honestly, when it came out, but I remember the trailer. And the trailer, I think, had "I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence" as like one of the key sort of phrases that they were using to market the movie. Like, oh my God, Nick Cage steals the Declaration of Independence. Or at least that's the thing that, as you're mentioning, I think people took away. But then in the movie, he doesn't actually say that for a while. And actually, he's the one who's saying, don't steal the Declaration of Independence. I can't let you do that.
I really need your help here.
Ian, I'm not gonna let you steal the Declaration of Independence.
Okay. From this point on, all you're going to be is a hindrance.
So there's this kind of like flip thing that happens. It's a little bit like that, like they knew that people were going to be waiting for that line, and then they're going to not give it to you, and they're going to withhold it and give you the opposite. It's a little bit like the most recent one that I love in this. It's just a personal thing, but is Tenet, where we watched the Tenet trailer so many times. All I have for you is a word, and then in the movie, it's all I have for you is a gesture.
I know. What?
And we were like, what the fuck? But do you remember if that was so? Like in the trailers that were hyping this up? I just have that memory. I don't know.
I had that memory too, but this is not one where I went back and watched the trailer for it, I guess. We'll have to do our own detective work here to get to the bottom of this.
I hadn't really thought about that, the puzzling out loud aspect of it. That is a bit of a challenging piece of acting to make interesting and fun, but not too silly. And the Da Vinci Code, we're just I feel like keep referring to that just because it's in our heads too, uses the sort of imagery of letters coming together in front of him because he's doing a lot of anagrams and stuff, and we don't have any visuals for him being like ironclad, iron will. He does it so well. Nick Cage is so charismatic and that he can make it somehow cinematic, him just trying to work through words in his head.
Yeah, I mean, he's really good at conveying changing emotions. I was just on another podcast, but I'm making the rounds with the book.
Of course.
But like, one of my favorite moments is that scene in Face Off when he is John Travolta's character in Nicolas Cage's body, and he has to go into prison and like beat somebody up.
Yes.
And he plays the emotions of I'm not sure what to do. Oh wait, I'm this guy. This guy would definitely attack him. Oh, I hate doing this. Oh, I actually kind of dig doing this. I hate myself for doing this. I mean, it's all silent, but he's just really able to make every one of those emotions legible while you're watching the film.
That's one of my favorite
moments
of Cage.
Absolutely.
No, moments in Cage's entire filmography.
Wow.
I'm with you.
Troy.
Me too. Yeah,
that part is it's absolutely incredible. That for me, like, it single-handedly bumps up that movie 1/2 star for me because it's just it's an incredible part. Yeah, and I mean, I think in this, the part that I thought was the most interesting and subtle of Cage's performance was when he goes to meet Diane Kruger for the first time. And Dr. What is her name? I'm going to call her Dr. Chase Meridian because I think that's Nicole Kidman's character in Batman.
Batman Forever, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's Dr. Abigail Chase.
Oh.
So I don't know why that stuck in my head, but anyway. And he and Riley are trying to slowly reveal what they know, right? But without losing her. Right. I think that's just for me because he's really struggling with the words. He's like, well, there's a map. It's invisible. That's great.
What led you to assume there's this invisible map?
We found an engraving on the stem of a 200-year-old pipe.
Owned by Freemasons.
May I see the pipe?
We don't have it.
Did Bigfoot take it?
It was nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you, too.
That really is a nice collection. Must have taken you a long time to hunt down all that history.
I know. Well, it's a movie that realizes that, like, they're going to have adults say treasure 300 times. And, like, it's just, you can't, it's just silly. Saying treasure is silly.
Yeah. I mean, that's also why the movie, I think, appeals to children, right? It's well, actually, let's talk a little bit about the broad appeal of this movie because I think it's kind of an incredible thing. So, in the book you talk about the 4-quadrant appeal, and I kind of think this has at least 3 of the 4 quadrants because it's got if you could even divide them up into 8s, which I don't know what that would be, but like, well, you got to think of like young kids. Like the 4 quadrants, one is like, I think it's like under, what is it, Keith? Is that like under 25?
Yeah, and under 25 or 25 men and women.
Men and women,
those are the four quadrants. And
you could even subdivide the under 25 into like, a little bit more, and you could think like, okay, you want to get the like 18 to 25, the under 18, and then even like the 12 to 18 and the under 12. But I was thinking like this movie kind of nails the like under 12 crowd, right? Because it's so, that's the treasure hunting thing. Like, what under 12-year-old kid isn't going to get excited about treasure hunting? Like, that's amazing. That's super fun. But also, if you're middle-aged, and especially a middle-aged guy, you're starting to think, I am suddenly interested in history. Why? Because I am fast becoming history. And I want to, just as I now feel like I can preserve my ancestors' lineage and I want my descendants to preserve my lineage, right? So suddenly that becomes really important to you. So you have this weird confluence of like it appealing to really young people and I think really old people, because those are the people that love history. And that's like, I don't know if there are any other movies that really do that, like hit those two demographics perfectly well. And then in the middle, yeah, you've got the like, I don't know. I mean, the people who at the time would be like, I'm fans of Nick Cage, right? Like, because I liked him in Face Off or whatever. So you have, and those are probably going to be like, 30 some guys, 20 to 30-year-old guys. And so I do feel like this movie has like, it's kind of crazy the amount of appeal that it has in a way. It's almost like it was manufactured to be as appealing to as broad as possible an audience.
No, Disney knows what they're doing, I mean, they're Disney for a reason.
I have to say, I'm in that category now. I really dug it. Yeah. So sliding doors, there's two dimensions of this, but I want to ask this first one first. I mean, where could Cage's career have gone had he leaned more strongly into the National Treasure type movie? Because it does feel like he flirts with it a little bit after, but it really feels like, as you were saying, these films, National Treasure 1, National Treasure 2, and then maybe later The Sorcerer's Apprentice, are a little bit of outliers. But maybe I don't have this totally right, but like, could he have leaned more into this family-friendly stuff, and then we would be talking about Nick Cage in actually a different way? He would be thought of in the way, I don't know, we think of maybe someone like Tom Hanks or maybe someone like Tom Cruise, and just the sense of like, man, this guy just like went all in, and now he's maintained that kind of like all-star bankable cred. It's like, what could he have done that would have cemented that?
Yeah. There's a lot of sliding doors moments in that career, really. I mean, one of the big ones being Superman, which didn't happen. And I think that could have, who knows, it could have altered the course of superhero films as well. I mean, I think one thing, the other one's being, I mean, he was offered both The Matrix and Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
And he did not take parts in either of those, in part because he wanted to, take him away from his kid. And he didn't want to be out of the country that long, which is, understandable. But I mean, it feels like now the strategy is to have a franchise to use as your anchor and make other movies between franchise films. And he never, he didn't. Ghost Rider is I don't think that great of a movie, although kids are watching it apparently. But it also kind of it appears in this weird moment in superhero movie history where like that first wave that X-Men and Spider-Man ushered in had kind of died down. There'd been like the Fantastic Four movies and a bunch of other disappointing ones, but it's before the MCU, before Iron Man kind of kicks up the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it kind of falls in the cracks that way, and the sequel isn't very successful. But that's another moment. But as you say, maybe a little more of this might have helped. I mean, after the first National Treasure movie, you get some really ambitious films that aren't financially successful. I'm not sure they're entirely artistically successful, but they're interesting. And Lord of War and The Weatherman is films for 2005, neither of which really connects. And they're tough films to market. And then after that, World Trade Center is actually a hit, and he's good in that movie. The Wicker Man becomes the punchline. Ghost Rider, as we talked about, we kind of went through that whole run, and like it almost feels like National Treasure. Some of these action films are an attempt to retreat to safety. Although at the same time, shortly after he does Bad Lieutenant Protocol New Orleans, which I think is a terrific movie, and just, shout out to Werner Herzog, who gave you the name of your podcast. But I think there's this attempt to find another place to fit into the marketplace that doesn't really quite, several that just don't quite work. The more adult action films. Next is a flop. Knowing is actually a hit. I don't know. It's kind of. Which is strange to think about because it's not really remembered as such. But none of these have the staying power of his action films.
Totally.
So yeah, a more if he'd, I guess you can kind of roughly you take out all the personal downfall stuff, and I'd say roughly what you could look at is Johnny Depp.
I was wondering about him.
More or less did that with the Pirates movies, and wasn't very successful mainstream entertainment for years after that, and probably would still be if there weren't some personal issues, I guess is
Yeah.
the polite way to
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was also thinking because the Pirates movies are going strong in this moment,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
and yeah, then he does all kinds of things for Disney, and the Tim Burton goes to Disney
Yeah.
too, and then it's just he's like
Mhm.
in one a year, and lots of makeup.
Can I ask you?
Alice in Wonderland is a dreadful movie, but everyone goes to see it
Yep.
anyway.
Yes,
But
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of Alice in Wonderland.
But do you know if he was ever offered anything in the MCU? Because it would be incredibly surprising to me that wasn't something that was on the table.
See, I have my doubts about it happening before recent years because, Ghost Rider was remembered and it was not part of the MCU.
Right.
So there was that because it was a separate licensing deal with that. And then, the MCU really builds up at the time when he's really doing a lot of direct to VOD stuff and is not really even making Hollywood films anymore. And I don't know that it was seen as a boon to have a Nicolas Cage, not a Nicolas Cage, the Nicolas Cage in your cast. So I don't really see that happening. I can almost see it happening now that his star is kind of on the rise again, and then I think people are remembering that there's a lot more to Cage than the funny Cage memes, and he is kind of inching back into mainstream films with Renfield, which is coming out in 2023. So, who knows? I was talking to somebody today who predicted he would have years ahead of him as a beloved character actor. And I can kind of see that.
Mm-hmm.
And, MCU loves to cast, beloved character actors or just recognizable faces.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I kind of was thinking like he would fit really nicely into like the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. I mean, a little bit like the way they put in Sylvester Stallone sort of shows up in Guardians 2. I was sort of thinking like that would be the kind of thing, but maybe it would be just too small. Maybe he would want a larger thing. But I mean, he's such a comic fan, and yeah, he had done Ghost Rider. I mean, I guess I don't know what this licensing thing is now, whether that could come back. But it also seems like right now we're like, as we talk, we're in this moment of like meta Cage. Everything now in his career is like self-reflexive, and he's engaged with his celebrity persona and how people perceive him as an actor, in as much as he's doing his own just first order acting narratives. And nowhere clear is this then the unbearable weight of massive talent, which is that's coming out soon.
April 22nd. I have not seen it yet. I know people who have seen it at Southwest liked it. I'm going to see it in a week or so at the Wisconsin Film Festival.
Awesome.
But I think the counterbalance to that is that, the film he did right before that is Pig, which I think did we talk about the last time I was on the show? I can't remember.
No.
But Pig is a really excellent drama where he gives a very subtle, naturalistic performance. I think one of his best performances in one of his best films. It was just out last year. So, I don't know how Unbearable Weight's going to be. Like I said, I think people seem to like it. The script is funny. Trailer makes me laugh. So I hope it's good. But I almost kind of, as someone who's followed his career, I kind of hope maybe it draws a line in the sand of like, we've made these jokes now. Let's just act. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder to what extent that's possible. I mean, I hope so too, because I think. But then again, I mean, here the counterpoint actually to all this is that I think that the what Nicolas Cage has done throughout his career, and this comes out really, really nicely in your book, is he's been ultimately interested in experimentation. So whatever art form he's given, if it's acting in on television, if it's acting in a small movie, if it's a serious role in a large movie, whatever it is, if it's romantic, if it's action, he's always trying to find some way through the material that's unique in his own. I suspect that what we're seeing right now is partly because of the meme culture and all that has like created this thing about him. that has become incorporated into his performance in a way, and he's reflecting on that. And so I think in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, that's like the most explicit. But I actually do think Pig, in a way, is a kind of meta textual commentary on his previous performances. Partly because that movie was marketed. I mean, at least the initial trailers made it seem like this was going to be John Wick with Nick Cage and a pig, right? So it was like set up like, just look, man, he's like bloodied, shit's going to go down, right? And then the movie is, of course, not that. It's a very pensive and slow and, reflective movie. But I think that part of that idea was that, we're going to take Nicolas Cage and sort of subvert your expectations, and that's going to become part of this film. And I mean, the whole movie is him going places and people being like, oh my God, you're Robin or whatever his name is, a little bit like, Nick Cage, you're Nick Cage, oh my gosh. And so there is this sort of, I felt like he was kind of playing into that to a certain extent, but then also subverting it and not doing the quote unquote full Cage. And I think that's fascinating. And I like that he's doing that. And I think that's inevitable in a way. But I agree with you that that's going to play itself out. Although God knows that we're sort of still in postmodernism. Like, can we get out of postmodernism? Like, we've been in fucking postmodernism for like 45 years. Can we move past this to some other form of engagement?
I think we're in postmodernism.
Okay, maybe I've been trying to hope that we've been in postmodernism, but whatever. And get back to like him just experimenting the way, or just doing what he would do without the burden of, his personality and all that. So I'm with you that I would hope that for that.
He's referred to it as a double-edged sword. Like it keeps him, it keeps them in the conversation in a way that a lot of his contemporaries just aren't. But it also kind of warps the perception. Like those supercuts of Cage freakout moments are really, most of those play much different in context than
for sure.
in
Totally.
than in the film itself. Pig is interesting too, because I don't know what the creative process behind that was. And when Nicolas Cage was considered for the role, but it does just map onto his career in some really interesting ways, of like someone who, used to be a star and has gone to live in the wilderness and is now, has reluctant feelings about coming back to it, and it's there's definitely some parallels there as well. But yeah, I don't know what comes next for him. It should be interesting.
It will be interesting no matter what. On that note, Keith, tell us, as a Cage scholar, tell us what some of maybe your favorite or more overlooked Cage performances, of the ones that are maybe less talked about, that our audience might be wondering, okay, I enjoyed National Treasure. I know some of the other ones, but which ones would you like to draw a little bit more attention to?
We touched on a couple of them. I think Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans is a really really terrific film, and it's kind of one who almost fell victim to, in some ways, did fall victim to. It's a little I don't know when we say meme culture began, but definitely that trailer was scrutinized and laughed at because it's got some pretty extreme stuff in it. But again, in context, it's very different. I think this is a really complex and interesting performance. It features some very big Nicolas Cage moments, but also some really quiet, reflective moments too. And I find it a really fascinating film about redemption and good and evil and very Herzogian as well. The one what was the other one I was going to touch on? Well, one we just played here. I was able to do a double feature for the book's release at the Music Box Theater here in Madison, in Chicago. I'm going to Madison to do a Nicolas Cage movie soon. We paired Face Off, which everyone knows and loves and is great, with Matchstick Men, which is a film he did with Ridley Scott. Have you guys seen that one?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's it kind of got, again, it's a tough film to market, especially in the era in which it came out. But I think it's a clever and fairly tender mystery when she plays a con man with some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Some kind of some combination of OCD and Tourette's.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really complex performance there too, and it played great with the audience too. Like, it didn't do that great in theaters, so it was really fun to screen it. And you could tell about half the people had seen it. I did a show of hands, and about half the people had seen it and half the people hadn't. And you can kind of tell which half was which by how they were reacting to various moments in the film. Too. But there's at least one more I like to point to, and now I'm well, I know one thing is Red Rock West is a little underseen these days. I think I'm not sure it's screening anywhere or what it was streaming anywhere, or was it streaming anywhere for a while, and that's when I would point people toward.
I think that's right. We have not seen it because we
couldn't get our hands on it.
Yeah, we couldn't get it when we were doing our Raging with Cage.
That may have changed. I'll just do a quick do some research on the fly here.
While you're doing that research, I would shout out Zandali. No, just kidding. That movie was real tough to watch, but I did watch that. That was streaming on Amazon Prime for some reason.
It still is. That's where I saw it too.
Oh, man,
that's some movie.
That's a weird movie.
I kind of enjoy watching it, and I enjoy that it exists, but I can't say it's good. No, Red Rock West is still in the non-streaming obscurity, which it feels like there's just, it's not even feels like it, there is an issue with films, particularly like from the 90s, that kind of have fallen through the cracks. Like, they were, you could watch them on VHS or DVD, but they never came to streaming. And I hope that changes, or the time reverses and people realize realize that physical media is the way to go.
Yeah.
And video stores come back and it's 1989 all over again, but that's probably not going to happen.
I miss Blockbuster.
Hey, Keith, like, people like us will have libraries of physical media, and that'll just be that. We'll be the curators when the internet goes down of stuff. People can rent from your library.
Yeah. PSA, sure. By the way, guys, did you know your library has physical media? Did you know?
That is true. Yes, 100%.
Right. Now, whether or not Red Rock West is on Blu-ray, that's another question.
It's probably not, but which is really unfortunate. But yeah, we have there's like a bunch of libraries that are all connected in the Boston area, and whenever I go to the library, I just spend time scrolling the catalog. And the Newton Public Library, just say, anyone from the Newton Public Library who's listening to this, I adore your selection of films, including your selection of foreign language films, in which I found like a remarkable number of Iranian films that I was not able to ever find anywhere else. So that was a kind of an amazing thing, and I got really excited about that. And I actually rented Goodbye to Language in 3D Blu-ray and watched it.
Oh wow!
Because we have a projector with 3D, and it was completely insane.
I saw that, so I saw that film projected, and it was really, I mean, I don't know that any late Godard is going to be my favorite Godard, but I was really happy to see it. And that thing that he does where there's two different images in each eye. Yeah. No one else has ever done that. You know what's funny? I went and read Bordwell on that film, where he goes through David Bordwell, people who don't know, he lays out the plot of that movie, and I thought, there's a plot of that movie? Apparently there's a murder mystery in this film, and all that was just completely eluded me as much as I dug the experience of watching it.
Totally. Yeah. I think there were 3 narratives happening simultaneously, but I could not track them at all. But that was a wild movie and does not star Nick Cage. So I will stop talking about it, but completely wild.
Sorry, I was just making a PSA about physical media.
Plugging local libraries. They're amazing resources, honestly. The other thing typically your local library can get you to do, sorry, Keith, you know all this, but tell the audience, Canopy, which has an amazing streaming library. Usually you can get access to it from your library. Okay, well, Keith,
not in Chicago.
Oh, you
don't
can't
have it here. No, I know it stinks. I want it. We have Hoopla, which has some nice things on it, but it's not the same.
Hoopla does have good stuff on it, actually. I think that's how we saw Koyaanisqatsi, and then you made you got pissed off at me for something.
I asked if they explain what does Koyaanisqatsi mean, and you're like, "Oh yeah, this movie's gonna explain it." Did it explain it?
And then at the end, I was joking with Laura. I was like, "Oh yeah, there's gonna be like a title card that says like what the point of the movie is," and at the end there was a title card.
Yeah. So
I was being facetious. Anyway, sorry. Okay, Keith, we thank you very much for being here. And
absolutely.
The book is, hold on, I've got it right here. It's got an amazing,
beautiful cover art
of Nick Cage. It's The Age of Cage: 4 Decades of Hollywood Through One Singular Career. The author is Keith Phipps. Keith, thank you very much for being here. Is there anything else? Where can people find you and read you?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm on Twitter at kphipps3000, which is I often just send links to a bunch of things. You can find my writing at places like The Ringer, GQ, Vulture, and TV Guide. Those are my main outlets these days. Except I have as you mentioned before, I have the newsletter with Scott Tobias, which is kind of just us doing whatever we want to do. And that's thereveal.substack.com. And we have a podcast, as you mentioned before, Next Picture Show, with Jenna Ukoski and Tasha Robinson, where we take a new movie and pair it with a classic movie and see how they talk to one another. And then it's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for being here, Keith. And
anytime,
my
pleasure.
Have fun on the tour, the book tour, the virtual book tour, that is. And we are at CowsPod on Twitter. You can find us on the web at cowspod.wordpress.com. And coming up in 2 weeks, that is on May 13th, we have It Follows with Alison Wilmore of Vulture. And one last thing, I keep forgetting to do this. We have, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to say it anyway. I made T-shirts for us just for the hell of it, and you can buy them on Threadless. So the website is cowspod.threadless.com, and so yeah, that's available now. And I think you could buy stickers and mugs and stupid, silly stuff like that. And yeah, most of the money goes to Threadless, but I think we get like 5 cents per item. So exciting. So if you want a picture of 2 cows, one flipped up over the other, and it says cows in the field, then you can get that there.
You know where to get it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.